Hi, and welcome to the Drum Can Do Festival. My name is Sunu Singh. And in this session, we're going to be talking about marketing as a force for positive change. A big topic, I know. With me to deal with this topic, I have Sylvia from Facebook, Tom Spaven from Bacardi, and Arjun Bose from General Mills. Welcome all. Viewers, we will also be unveiling a remarkable initiative between Facebook and the Drum, which aims to unite the industry in London, New York, and Singapore, where we are trying to focus on driving impact for small to medium-sized businesses, which are owned by minority groups. And both Arjun and Tom are the mentors for this initiative, about which we will be talking about in detail in a bit. So let's start off with the first question, talking about how marketing can be used as a power for good. So in response to the world that we live in, can I start with you, Sylvia? Is that a reality that marketing can be used in its prowess for social good?
I think absolutely. I think we first have to look at the world that we currently living now, which is quite a crazy year and a crazy world, and saying that it's probably an understatement. I think with all the things we're seeing around COVID-19, the pandemic, we're seeing so many new challenges, not just facing the marketers, but also the consumers and our customers. People everywhere, right? They're coping with fear, they're coping with shock and sadness. A lot of people have lost their jobs or they worry that they're about to. It's certainly, a scary time for a lot of people. But also with that, I think it's, to marketers, I think it's never been more important, or it's never been, a better time to really put a purpose and really put a good at the core of everything we do. On the company level, we've done a few things since the starting of the pandemic. First and foremost, I say, is really to ensure everyone has access to the right information, to the accurate information. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen, the Coronavirus Information Center, which is the top of your news feed. We created at the beginning of the pandemic, really hoping to provide a central place just for information, for people to get the latest, to get the news, get the information they need, as well as the resources so that they can go back to support their family, to support their communities. We're also assisting the public health response. We're giving the World Health Organization as many free ads as they need for their COVID-19 response. And also we're giving support and millions more in ad credits to other organizations in need. But I think more importantly, and I hope we'll get to talk more about this today, is also our work on economic relief efforts. We're launching a $100 million grant program to help 30,000 small businesses around the world at places, where we have offices, where we have our employees. And we're really hoping to do what we do best, which is to help people stay connected while we are all apart, right? So we have launched a community help for a place to not just get the support from companies or, agencies and brands, but also to help each other. So if you see someone in your neighborhood that will need, grocery shopping because they're older, you can find that and you can call for help as well using this new hub. But I think fundamentally, beyond what just the company or the agency or the brand or the marketer, marketing world that we live in, beyond those stakes that we all take, as a whole. But I think fundamentally for us individually, there's so much more that we can do as a human being to really use our skills and use our knowledge and expertise, use the function of marketing to help those who might need it. So a personal story, and this is for me like deep to my heart, because there's a neighborhood bar. I used to live in West Village. There's a neighborhood bar called Antoine. We actually eloped there and had our after party from our wedding. And so when COVID first started, we were watching the news, and you saw news on TV every day about small businesses that are suffering. A lot of people they can't even keep their business open. They can't serve the people they love anymore. So just out of curiosity, I reached out to Antoine, to that bar on Instagram. I just pinged them a DM and said, "Are you guys doing all right?" And they responded within seconds and they said, no, we're not. We're about to close down. We don't have customers. No one's, going to bars, or the government, the city is about to, to close down all those non-essential businesses. And I was, it was heartbreaking for me to hear that. So just naturally, I put my marketer hat on. I was like, oh, have you tried, you have a huge following on Instagram. Have you tried to maybe, ask, give your story out to the people who've been following you, try to set up, a fundraising page, or, gift card for people who, like me, who will want to help, can also reach out and help you to support your businesses? Or have you tried, delivery services, right? Like you can do to-go lunch meals, to-go cocktails. You can even reach out to the neighborhood, right? Like to see how people can all come together to get you through, this period of time, or at least help you pay rent, doing the small parts we can all do. And they actually took my advice and they ran with it. So now they are about to reopen their backyard, and they've been living, not saying thriving, but living through this really hard time. And that just makes me realize, even though the small parts that we see keep a business alive, just using the skills we have and the things we know as marketers. And those are the small parts that we're playing. But imagine the small parts when it comes together. That's when we can form those deep connections, and that's when we can make the small parts into something big and something positive and a big change in our society as marketers coming together.
Tom, I have to ask, especially after the story about Entwine that Sylvia has just shared, is you and I have already spoken about your response, your brands and business response to the pandemic. And of course, the world that we live in. I mean, in terms of the challenges that Sylvia has spoken about, would you like to tell us about how, as a brand, you've been helping the communities that are part of the drinks business, bartenders, for instance, who have been impacted greatly?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that was a perfect segue, I think, to hear about the struggles of a very popular bar in the West Village, going through these hard times and perhaps not knowing how to respond and not having the expertise. And one of the things that Bacardi as a group have done is an initiative called Raise Your Spirits, which is effectively a donation, but working with organizations to support out-of-work bartenders, restaurants through this time. And, it's down to each individual actor. We have people in the markets who typically on a day-to-day basis would be involved in, promoting the brand, trying to get a listing of a, product into a bar. But everything has shifted now because it just, with the context that we're in, it just doesn't feel appropriate. It doesn't feel right that brands should be peddling, themselves. And obviously we have a business to protect, but if you look at how the people that support our brands and have done for years are suffering right now, we have to give our platforms and our expertise to help them. It's not even, if this goes beyond marketing, this goes just into good corporate citizenship. So, there's not just one bar in the West Village, it's all over the country that people have been suffering. So we've been trying to help with that. That's an ongoing effort. It's definitely more than, a one-off donation. And, at the company level, it's happening. I think at a brand level, so my role is to manage a Bombay Gin. And the first thing I will say is that we have to acknowledge that what we have done and what we're doing is nowhere near enough now. And if we're talking about what we've historically done to support emerging creatives and artists, that's been great, and it's always been something that's part of our mission. But now, in the context of the arts being defunded, and even now with the very latest events in culture, we just have to dial up what we do in communities best, which is to drive equal representation in the arts and the creative world. So I'll probably get on to talk about that shortly, but in essence, companies, brands with marketing expertise and resources just have to turn over and just unlock all of their expertise and their platforms to help people who need it. That's as simple as that, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I would quite, Arjun, like to unpack what Tom just said. This goes beyond marketing. I mean, your career has been largely FMCG or a CPG industry, and historically, that's one industry which has always talked about and indeed worked around sort of working in not just the product, marketing of the products, but beyond that, in trying to sort of help the communities around it. I mean, as a marketeer, what do you think? I mean, is the dial shifting, as Tom said, beyond marketing?
I mean, for sure. But I'm going to say this, it's definitely led by marketing. Marketing is such a central part of the narrative. So if you think about it as in throughout history, you'll say, marketing provides a few very essential things, and more so now more than ever, right? It provides perspective. It provides comfort. It provides solutions to consumers during all times and more so during challenging times. So if you think about the economy needs that marketing thought leadership and needs marketers, because essentially at the end of the day, yes, you're driving commerce, you're also giving people a reason to believe, you're giving them hope, and somewhere in terms of fueling the economy, you're also giving them a reason to spend. So for sure, I'm going to say it's way beyond marketing, but we're doing marketing with heart. We're doing marketing with sentiment here. And so, but at the same time, this is the moment to be bold, not so much as marketers, but really to be bold in a very responsible kind of way, because our world is shifted, our consumers' worlds are disrupted. And so this is kind of where we need to sort of take the reins, especially on CPG brands, because we're here together, we shape that narrative, and this is where we can move the dial and really provide that assurance.
For both
And I'll
Tom and
say
Arjun,
this is
actually.
quite. I was going to say this. I think one of the things we do at General Mills is we're really, really focused on driving our purpose, and it's almost a very noble place to be in. I mean, this is really where I realized what a noble profession we're in the business of food, right? Because we're about serving the world with food people love, and in these times, we say we're serving the world with food people need. So that is front and center for every action that we're taking right now.
Yeah. Well, I would argue that Tom is in a very noble profession as well, working for Bacardi. I mean, we need those
No, I
brands
meant
as well.
food.
But
Yeah. Absolutely.
As marketeers, I would like to ask. You were talking about the nobility in the profession and driving that kind of narratives. Of course, the world has changed. The world, no one could have predicted the kind of world that we live in now. But really, is it not about just going to the basics? Because that is what marketing has always been about. It's about changing behaviors. But I suppose what the focus now is that because of how consumers and indeed businesses are all hurting, then businesses have to drive the whole concept of doing good. That makes your job harder in a way, or does it? This question is both for Arjun and Tom.
I can jump
Tom?
in. Hopefully the delay on the line will be manageable. But yeah, look, you mentioned that we have to balance out doing good in the world and keeping our businesses and our livelihoods afloat. I think those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive. If you look at every single brand, almost every brand in the world is having to reshape its actions right now. Whether some are doing better because they're in the business of hand sanitizers, for example, or like the majority of brands, we're having to figure out strategies on how to survive. You just because you're in a survival mode doesn't mean that you have to forget about what good you can do in the world. So it's interesting to see the shifts in consumer behavior because Bombay Sapphire is a famous brand which is trusted, and we've been performing reasonably well in this time period. Now, obviously, the business has suffered as a result of bars and restaurants closing, but we talked about this on our last chat, and we're growing market share right now, and of course we appreciate that. We don't underestimate how important that is. I think the key thing is not to call victory, not to gloat about it, and just to make sure we're doing what we can to do effective basic product marketing, which we have to do to keep the lights on, and with whatever spare, energy and I guess cash we have to try and support people for the long term that ultimately are going to support us for 100 years. So it's I think there's a time for doing the basics really well now, with limited budgets, and sometimes it can help you reframe your core strategy, because what some brands find is that they've forgotten to tell consumers about who they are and what they are. So it's a chance to maybe just think about what your core fundamental proposition is, and you can double down on that, which is good practice. But it's been an interesting time, that's for sure.
I think you raised something really interesting on sorry, go ahead, Sonu. You were saying. I was just going to say, I'm going to echo Tom's point, saying, when we speak of life here at the Mills, we are winning in the marketplace, and that's quite frankly because we have lived our values. We have looked after our people. We have looked after our consumers. We have looked after our brands, right? And that's why we're winning market share in, say, 9 out of our 10, leading global categories across the globe. And that's not something we forget, and certainly that's not something we take for granted. But we have seen really emerge, and it's something I'm sure Tom, in your fantastic portfolio of Bacardi brands, you'll see is big brands are back because familiarity and trust is at an all-time high. So people are really veering towards their comfortable favorites. We're seeing moments unprecedented, which we haven't seen in our history, such as, the whole world is a baker right now, right? And the whole, the kitchen is the heart of the home, and especially when you're in a food company such as ours, this is the moment for us to sort of remind people and ensure that you have brand salience, but done so in a really empathetic kind of way.
Yeah. Those are some really interesting points you raised, because obviously, both of you work for big brands, big established businesses as well. And in terms of sort of businesses that are being hurt, those challenges are actually quite huge for small business enterprises, which is why, Sylvia, I would quite like you to tell our viewers about this partnership that I talked about earlier. I mean, and indeed the reasons why you would quite like to focus on the small businesses that almost make up our communities that we live in.
I think, Sonu, you're absolutely right. I think through the pandemic and the crisis, there are different types of businesses. And one thing is certain is everyone is living through this state of panic and uncertainty. But there are some businesses, they have the resources, they can weather the storm, they can, re-emerge. But a lot of the others, they might not be as fortunate, especially, those small to mid-sized businesses. And particularly those that are owned by minority groups, we're seeing, the situation is urgent for them. They need help. They need to get as much help as they can get, and they need help right now. So for them, it's all about how can we, provide help, how can we provide guidance beyond just to and Tom, to a point, beyond marketing, but as communities coming together, how can we give back to those businesses and those people who are in need? So this is pretty much how the idea of our initiative or project, marketers can change the world, or marketers have the power to change the world, how it was born is really to think about how we can use the collective brain power of this advertising industry that we live in, and to really help give it back to the businesses we love, to the businesses that need help, and to drive their business forward. And that's why we're so thrilled with partner with the Drum, and also to see Tom and Arjun as our mentors to really come together. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring together a group of rising star marketers in 3 different regions. In New York, in Singapore, as well as in London. So those are rising stars. They will partner with our mentors. Another shout out to Tom and June for being being really to use our expertise to also mentor and nurture all those new talents. And we will bring everyone together across the industry to work on a brief that will aim at, making a difference in local areas. So maybe it's to support women-owned businesses, to support minority or, refugee-owned businesses, or to support businesses that are owned by Asian groups. And we will take note of their journey, right? From the briefing stage to ideation, to a hackathon, to development of the idea or the campaign or the creative at the end. And it will produce a lot of the content and the videos through the Drum Network. And the hope is not just to have 3 different groups, but all the content can also inspire the marketers or the rising stars around the world to do our parts, to really, use our skills and give back to those people in need. So collectively, we can also come together to have the power to change the world, if we call it.
Well, thanks for that. Tom, I'm curious, what is it that you're hoping for from this project? I mean, what would you like to see coming from this project?
So, I mean, firstly, it's a huge honor to be asked to take part in this. And I think it probably goes without saying that I think I'm going to learn a lot more from the rising stars than they'll probably ever learn from me. The list of people that you have is exciting. I think is incredible. And, if you look at the New York project, clearly I'm not the world leading authority on small, medium-sized businesses led by women, right? So all I can hope to do is try and just lend perspective, ask the right questions, and actually perhaps coming back to the theme of using the access that we have as big companies. I mean, there are people that we know, there are, that's the dreaded term influencers that we work with who certainly are experts in this field, and I think we'll love to help. So really for me, it's an honor to be doing something like this, to be giving back in some way. And it's a way that we can continue to, share the love and give back to the community in a way that ultimately the output of this project is going to be real tangible work that hopefully will be picked up, not just in the media, but picked up by small businesses and used for a more equal world. I mean, I work for a brand and I lead a brand that is really obsessed with driving equality in the art world. And we have a lot of experience with working with communities and giving back and championing and giving platforms to kind of underrepresented creatives from all over the US. And I just want to pay it forward. And the benefit for me personally will be huge. And as I said, I think the talent that you have is going to dwarf anything that I can offer on this. So I'm just excited to take part and give back. Yeah.
And Arjun, what about you? And are you also hoping to bring any of your experiences, because like Tom, you've also worked across geographies as well, to the project itself?
Almost going to echo Tom saying, it's such a privilege. And I'm going to quote one of my biggest idols, Billie Jean King, and I'm going to say it's a pressure. There's pressure in the best kind of way, but she said it best. She said pressure is a privilege. I've had the privilege of meeting her, and it's one of her favorite statements. And the other thing is when you say, the moment of your biggest opportunity is also the moment of almost, I'm going to say, your greatest humility. So I'm deeply humbled. I'm really, really privileged that you thought of me. I think we've all been in marketing really because we know the power it has, the influence it has on how it's almost, the beating heart of organizations and how it can really, really affect change. Especially in organizations. And Tom and I, learned our trade in L'Oreal. You learn from a very young age at L'Oreal to be an empowered entrepreneur. And I probably speak just for them, but really in some of the best world-class organizations where marketing is the driving force, that, you have that privilege to be able to influence the lives of consumers, of customers, pretty much every cross-functional team. You're kind of a beacon. So in some shape or form, it's deeply humbling to be able to touch lives. just like Tom, I think, the youth are basically the ones that we need to be learning from. So for me, it's a huge, huge learning opportunity. I love paying it forward. I do love volunteering some of my time with foundations. So the opportunity to work with young marketers in this geography is hugely exciting. Sponsored by, the Drum, with whom I have immense respect for, and Facebook. So I can't thank you enough for this project that you put together. And I think it's going to be an exciting journey. And I love the fact that you've built a global footprint while we're doing this. So we'll be learning all of each other really in this ecosystem.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the realities in terms of, how exactly, well, not exactly, how, in terms of driving that social and the economic impact for these small to medium-sized enterprises. I mean, the reality really is that obviously both of you come from big established brands, and therefore you have the tools, you have the resources, and maybe they're not the same as they were, say, 3 months ago. But when you compare those to these SMEs, I mean, they are just stupendously big and enormous. The one thing that as an industry we love talking about are, we love throwing words. So we like throwing words like disruption and transformation and innovation. But for a small, medium-sized business, if they were, run by women, run by ethnic minority groups, run by Asian groups, which are going to be much more severely impacted by all the challenges that we have at the moment. I mean, are there any kind of top tips that you would, what would you advise? Tom?
I was not sure if that was just my signal. You cut off at the end, but I think I got the gist of the question.
Yeah, it was me as well.
Like
yeah,
Arjun and I.
Entirely. Yeah.
Okay, I'll keep going. It's we definitely come from big companies.
You're cutting off in parts. Yeah.
Am I? Okay. Relatively large budgets. I think the thing that I've come to realize over time is that no matter how big your budget or your brand, the fundamentals of marketing are not changing. And actually, even from the pre-digital age to the post-digital age, the fundamentals of human behavior and insight don't change that much. So with that in mind, I think we'll be able to still provide a lot of value to, a campaign that's really aimed at supporting small and medium-sized businesses run by minority groups. What I personally don't necessarily have is the perspective of what it's like to be in that position. So one of the things I have to do is ask exponentially more questions and learn before I can start to think that I'm in a position to advise. I mean, but I think we'll be able to do that. I think we'll be able to call on resource, internal and external, to help. But it's going to be an incredible journey for sure. And if there's anything that we can do to give a more level playing field for business, it's going to be a good thing. And it's going to be interesting to report back. I can't wait.
Before I come to you, Arjun, on this point, Sylvia, in terms of, Facebook has taken it upon itself to focus on SMEs during this period. I mean, you're running quite a few initiatives to try and help these small to medium-sized enterprises. I mean, how are you approaching this issue? I mean, is this an overarching theme that you have within Facebook, or are you taking it by geographies? What's the thinking behind this?
I just first want to double click what Tom said is, the number one thing, and sometimes the most important thing, is to listen, right? So we started with a listening tour. We listened to the small to medium businesses to really understand how we can support them. And what we heard from a lot of the small businesses, we heard loud and clear that a little financial support goes a long way. So that's the number one thing they will want, is some financial support to really keep their business afloat. So we started, that's why we announced that we're investing $100 million to help 30,000 small businesses in 30 different countries. I think this is a critical injection that we can do to really help small businesses to, who need it the most, to not just keep their lights on, but also pay their bill, but also, pay their employees and pay the people, and to keep the economy, running and reemerge in that way. But also that's not enough. We also learn from them that they want more, trainings. They want, to help honing their skills and to get on this, digital journey, to making sure their business can, survive, in a new environment with everything that's going on in the world. So we're also creating and we're updating a lot of the free modules, free e-learning courses, and virtual training programs to give the skills and give those trainings to the people who need it the most. And last week, on the minority owned and the lands, we also announced that we are now supporting U.S. Black businesses and diverse communities now, and for the long-term future of this economy. So we've committed that over $200 million will go to Black-owned businesses, Black creators, and the nonprofits that are serving the Black community. And it's part of a $1.1 billion we're actually giving, to support diverse suppliers and the communities in the U.S. now. And again, it's really to look long-term and see what we can do to play a part in here. But also, I think what's also really important is, it's beyond that, is how to help those businesses evolve, right? I think Sonu, you just said the transformation and all those buzzy words. What does that really mean for the small to medium businesses? So I think the first step is a lot of the business models are relying on commerce. So for us, we have a suite of products and apps and services that we can give back to them to support. So we've been doubling down and really invest and accelerate our commerce work to make sure our products are the latest, up to date, to really meet the people where they are. So we launched Facebook Shops, for example, a few weeks ago, to make it easier for people to set up, online stores that have access on Facebook and Instagram. But I think it all comes back to one thing, and I think that applies not to just Facebook, but to the society overall, is we are in the business of small business. So we have to keep listening. We have to keep building for what they need. And this can be just it. So we'll have to also look into the future and see what other things we can do to work hand in hand with those businesses, with policymakers, with influencers in the industry, and create more of those, communities and influencers to really find new ways to give them their voices heard, and to give them economic opportunities for them to come back and to keep growing, and to support their families and their own communities in that way.
And indeed, within this entire conversation, what we have to obviously discuss is the consumer needs as well. As much as there is that drive to make sure that our communities, and therefore smaller businesses, are just as resilient as the bigger businesses, the consumer, their needs are changing day by day. So Arjun, for instance, you must have seen at General Mills the days of baking banana bread, and therefore the need for buying more flour and yeast. That spike might be coming down a bit, but what that means is that especially in times of crisis, when consumer needs are changing and moving so quickly and so fast, what does innovation mean at that time?
A few things, really, right? And yes, the most important thing is basically being open to new tools. Second thing is, what you're likely to see during this point in time is you have probably just expanded your penetration pool drastically. So you're going to have to sort of rethink and innovate in terms of your retention strategy as well. So, because your spectrum's just gotten a whole lot wider. So I think that's kind of where we are at as well, because, there's a changing role of food. Let's say if I were to apply it to our industry, but it's also a change in terms of where and how you get food, and therefore the role of, say, the kitchen being at the heart of the home and stuff, and therefore, and obviously e-commerce, right? So I think it's also the channel strategy around which we're all going to have to sort of reinvent, and I think we've seen some fantastic agility there from some of the biggest CPGs sort of going down that route. Now, The question is, how sustainable is that? Is that a sort of a short-term play? Because sometimes we're doing it with a bit of a test and learn approach, versus is that going to be a sustainable long-term strategy for us? Is the question. But yeah, it's forcing us to completely rethink the entire 4Ps approach for us. But just on that point, Sonu, I mean, want to go back to kind of what Tom said about us, how are we adding value to the SMEs and these young stars. The fundamentals of marketing don't change, right? And it starts with the 4Ps, right? So depending on whatever business you're working on, depending on whatever your branding approach is, if you've got your 4Ps, your ducks line in a row, and you're very sound on strategy, and basically if you think about the three virtues that really work today more than ever, that really speak to consumers more so now than before, whether it's simplicity, authenticity, and honesty, those shout out louder than before. I've been very fortunate in over the about a year back, when I was part of our new ventures team, and I helped set that up for Europe and Australasia. So what we have in General Mills is we've got a bit of a venture capital new ventures team that basically makes minority investments in SMEs, and we've got a few of them in the US, and that really allows us to really help a lot of startups and young entrepreneurs with seed capital or with direct equity, and we offer them our expertise in whichever field, tapping into our resources, and and Tom, what I can tell you is, having, our role therefore is to really be a shepherd of that community, is to really mentor this set. And it's not necessarily, and we don't necessarily land up mentoring everybody that we're invested in, because, you'll be surprised, a lot of trained classically in the big corps, it's, oh God, I mean, for a lot of these people, it's gold. So somewhere, just being able to donate some of my time, I'd love being able to do that. And, and I think the learning curve, just being able to sit down with them, because, humans by their very nature, entrepreneurs are bold, they're able to do a bunch of things, but, it's only really when they kind of get unstuck that you can sit down and we can really rely on our experiences, because we've been through it lots and lots of times. And what is almost intuitive for us in terms of problem solving isn't quite the case for them. And that's kind of where we can draw on our resources. So that's something I genuinely enjoyed with us with 301.
Yeah, and within that context, obviously, Tom, there is this whole evolution of marketing and the role of marketing as well. So you've got the 4Ps, and then obviously marketers have added the 3Ps. The fourth P is the purpose. But how do you then balance out purpose with things like pricing? And when you are talking and advising SMEs, for instance, what do you think top tips should be for their sustainability in the long term?
Yeah, so the fundamentals haven't changed, and I think that I read an article recently about a term called brand experience, which is effectively it's the sum of everything that you have rolled into one. And it sounds incredibly straightforward to do, but it's astonishing how few brands really have it buttoned up. And it's not just your 4Ps, but it's your tone of voice, it's your distribution strategy, it's everything. And that doesn't change whether you're a 100 grand startup or a $100 billion company. So I think Arjun said some great things about agility, because you could be the best marketer in the world, but if you can't react to what's happening in the marketplace in a timely way, then you're just going to have great ideas on PowerPoint that are just going to stay on PowerPoint or Keynote or whatever the kids have these days. So it's about being able to get insight from the market in real time and be able to adapt to that. Now, big companies have a lot of benefits and a lot of advantages, but they also can be less agile. So, one thing that we hope to be able to pay forward is the quick thinking that we perhaps have into a more agile, smaller, medium company, because I'm sure anyone who's been through the ranks in big corporations can probably relate to a few occasions where they've been frustrated at not being able to move quickly enough. And I wanted to touch on another point around back to particularly the New York project and around purpose. Yes, purpose is important, and every brand should have a purpose. But for me, that doesn't mean that every brand has to try and save the world, right? I think that there are some brands that can literally save the world if you're saving the whales. But there are also some brands whose purpose, it's enough to have a purpose that is to delight your target audience in a specific occasion and do it in an ethical and responsible way. So that's one thing I want to try and communicate to all of the small companies we work with, is that you've got to define your purpose, and it doesn't necessarily have to be as big as you think it needs to be, because there's roles for big companies to save the world, and there's role for smaller companies to produce fantastic products that help solve consumer demand. And and coming back to the equality thing, I think that it's sad to see the stats that have been outlined in terms of how female-run companies have less access to capital. I think it's just an education thing, and realizing the power of not just women-run companies, but having equal representation in your company, and how that will benefit your company's bottom line in the long run. If you're serving half the world's population who are female, and you don't have women on leadership positions in your company, you're not going to be able to serve those consumers in an accurate way. And it extends for us. And Arjun and I work for big companies, but we work with smaller partners, right? We work with media partners, but we work with agencies, and there are daily opportunities for us to get it right and to do the right thing. And that means demanding that our agency partners have equal representation of minority groups, and ultimately all of the work will be better as a result of that. It's not just about doing it because it's a box ticking exercise. This is going to benefit companies and shareholder value in the long run. So it's all wrapped up in the need to do the right thing, and that's not a brand purpose. It's just a good way of doing business.
Yeah, and of course, Sylvia, the overarching idea is that we get all these marginalized groups, whether it's businesses run by women or by the aging population, or indeed by immigrants, getting them back into workforce and making it sustainable for them, for the overall economy to work. But the last word that I want to have from you, Sylvia, is what do you think you would want to get out of this initiative? What are your aims and ambitions for this?
Yeah, I will answer that question by what we don't want it to be. We don't want it to be, storytelling for the sake of storytelling. We don't want it to be creating new work just for the sake of creating new work. I think first is to tell the stories of to showing really the impact of marketing, of how it can actually save a business and help businesses in this time of uncertainty or crisis. But also is to take the content that will come out of this so that it can create some kind of a ripple effect to bring more people to come in and to play their parts. And so that when we think of the scale and when we think of the longevity of this project or this initiative, we can actually see in people not just talk about purpose, but purpose with action, purpose to give back to their own community and drive those actions to bring more people into this, and together see the bigger and larger effect we can all play as marketers in the world.
Well, brilliant. I bet we can't all wait to get started, because also for all of you to be sharing your sort of sense of optimism in this age of division and anger, that's quite something to look forward to. So thank you all for participating in this panel. And thanks, viewers, for watching. Keep on watching Can Do Festival. There's lots to come. Thanks and goodbye.